Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you're feeling chronically exhausted right now, let me tell you, you are definitely not alone. Today we're going to look way back, about 40,000 years, to the Paleolithic era, to finally understand exactly why we feel this way. It's an incredible journey of discovery, because as it turns out, our modern everyday grind is completely at odds with how our minds and bodies were actually built to function.
I mean, think about it for a second. Why does the standard 40-hour work week feel so deeply unnatural? It's a question that plagues almost all of us, right? You drag yourself out of bed, you sit in traffic, you stare at screens all day, and you just feel this constant low-grade thrum of stress. And what do? We tend to blame ourselves. We think, oh, I just need better time management, or I just need another cup of coffee. But what if the problem isn't actually you? What if the problem is a massive mismatch between your modern environment and your ancient biology?
To really wrap our heads around this, we first have to bust a pretty big myth. Pop culture loves to paint our ancestors from 40,000 years ago as these grunting, brutish creatures who just barely survived a nasty, short, and super violent life. But the archaeological reality? It's radically different. These people were not primitive, beta versions of us. They were us. They were anatomically and cognitively identical to you and me. They possessed the exact same capacity for deep emotion, complex language, and brilliant creativity that we do today. In fact, anthropologists have this fantastic term for them, and it completely flips our whole perspective on wealth upside down. They call them the original affluent society. And they weren't affluent because they were hoarding possessions or luxury goods. No, they are considered affluent because they easily satisfied their material needs with minimal work. And this left them completely time-rich. They had an absolute abundance of freedom for leisure, making art, and just deeply connecting with one another. It's crazy when you realize how skewed our perspective on human history really is. When we think of history, the Great Pyramids, the Roman Empire, the entire industrial age, we're actually looking at a tiny, tiny fraction of time. Barely 5,000 years. That is less than 2% of the human story. Today, we are exploring the other 98%. That vast, often overlooked stretch of time that actually built our nervous systems and shaped our deepest psychological needs. So let's look at how this shaped our deepest daily routines, starting with literally how we wake up. Modern sleep forces us into these rigid, continuous 8-hour blocks, usually fueled by jarring, blaring alarms and that creeping anxiety of trying to fall back asleep if we wake up in the middle of the night. But Paleolithic sleep? Entirely natural. You were pulled into consciousness gradually by the dawn. Plus, humans back then likely practiced biphasic sleep, meaning waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a crisis or terrifying loss of productivity for the next day. It was totally normal.
You know when you wake up at 2 a.m. and immediately start stressing? Well, back then, waking up at 2 a.m. wasn't a sleep disorder at all. It was an essential, built-in community safety net. While the rest of the band slept closely together, someone was always awake. They'd be quietly chatting, tending to the fading fire, just listening for the snap of a branch or the footfall of a predator. This shared vigilance was quite literally what kept the whole community alive.
Okay, so as the morning began, the work of survival started. But again, we need to shatter that Hollywood myth of the glorious nonstop mammoth hunt. Believe it or not, the vast majority of their calories, around 70%, actually came from gathering plants. We're talking roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, and berries. And gathering wasn't just mindless, unskilled labor. It required an immense, highly specialized knowledge of hundreds of specific plant species and a practiced eye to spot exactly what was safe and edible. Now get ready for this, because this number is just absolutely staggering to discover. 3 to 5. That is the number of hours our ancestors typically spent working each day. Yes, really. Surviving, gathering food, and securing all their material needs only took about 3 to 5 hours. And here's the best part. Once the baskets were full, the workday was entirely over. There was no concept of hurrying, no middle management, and absolutely no artificial schedule to follow. When you put these two worlds side by side, the contrast is literally breathtaking. On one side, we have our modern grind. We're talking about an exhausting, continuous 40-plus-hour work week plagued by epidemic diseases that thrive in dense cities, leaving us chronically, deeply burnt out. And on the other side, the Paleolithic day. A mere 3 to 5 hour workday, followed by abundant freedom, leisure, and honestly, far better overall health, all protected within small, mobile, tight-knit groups. So, what did they do with all that free time? Well, they perfected their crafts. Making stone tools through what's called the prepared core technique wasn't just banging rocks together. It was a complex act of geometry and physics that took years to master. But psychologically, this is fascinating. The tools they created were actually far more symmetrical and beautiful than they strictly needed to be just to survive. Even 40,000 years ago, creating something beautiful provided a profound sense of identity, reputation, and status within the group.
And this brings us to what I think is absolutely crucial: the major psychological difference between our worlds regarding stress. Modern stress is terrible for our biology because it's low level, it's constant, it's never ending, and it's incredibly isolating. You're just simmering in anxiety at your desk, all alone. Paleolithic stress, however, it was occasional and high stakes. When they did hunt, it wasn't a daily grind. It was an intense, communal burst of adrenaline that had a clear beginning, middle, and end.
And speaking of hunting, when they did go out, they utilized an absolute masterpiece of human adaptation called persistence hunting. Now look, we aren't the fastest sprinters in the animal kingdom, but because we lost our thick body hair and developed the highly unique ability to sweat, we can do something incredible. We can run steadily for hours in the scorching midday heat, right up until a much faster, fur-covered animal simply collapses from pure exhaustion.
Then, when a hunt was successful, the meat was distributed according to these really complex social rules to make sure absolutely everyone was fed. This was the ultimate sharing economy. And honestly, selfish hoarding was physically impossible anyway without refrigeration. So sharing wasn't just some nice act of altruism, it was the only rational survival strategy to ensure the community would catch you when your own luck inevitably ran out. As the sun set, the focus shifted entirely to the inner life. Imagine this. Without screens or a barrage of emails to answer, evenings were purely for connection. People engaged in social grooming to reinforce bonds, and the air would literally fill with music from bone and mammoth ivory flutes. And around the fire, storytelling took center stage. In a world without writing, these stories were the group's hard drive. They downloaded crucial data for survival directly into the next generation, sharing maps, recipes, and important warnings. And this rich inner life extended to an even deeper human need: art. Sometimes the band would travel deep, deep into pitch-black caves just to paint these magnificent masterpieces of galloping horses using incredibly complex shading and perspective. Just think about this for a second. Some of these cave paintings are 36,000 years old. That is a staggering 8 times older than the Great Pyramid of Giza.
So why put in all that immense effort to paint deep in the dark? Was it hunting magic? A classroom for the kids? The truth likely comes down to this really beautiful idea. They created simply because something inside them had to transform the world into something beautiful and meaningful. It proves that human life, at its very core, has always been about a profound need for meaning and belonging, not just base physical survival.
All right, let's bring this all the way back to you. You are trying to navigate a crazy, fast-paced modern environment full of concrete, glass, alarms, and glowing screens. But your human hardware, your entire nervous system, was sculpted by 300,000 years of open skies, tight-knit community, and a 3 to 5 hour workday. We are literally carrying Stone Age brains into a concrete world. So that ache of disconnection and burnout you feel, it is completely valid. It is simply the friction of this massive evolutionary mismatch. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. You are a continuation of that long, fragile, incredible line of ancestors. You have a Stone Age brain trying its best to survive in a modern world. So, what is it asking for today? Maybe it's a reminder that the world can actually wait until morning. Maybe it's a deep, evolutionary call for more rest, more community, and honestly, just a little more time to watch the clouds.